very often with breads, a lot of people, although they're not celiac, and they have a bit of a problem with gluten-containing breads. Another problem is a lot of the modern produced breads, the commercial ones, contain a very, very large amount of additives. Now these additives potentially could cause lots of different problems with inflammation. And anything, the more processed something tends to be, and the more that put into it, especially in an additive point, in a mass production point of way, as a general rule of thumb, it tends to get worse. Not necessarily all the time, but it's a good guideline. So this is gluten-free breads, although I myself am not celiac, at least I don't think I am, because the only way to be absolutely sure is to get a test, because very often this is an illness that doesn't have any symptoms. And it's also an illness of malnutrition as well, interestingly. But anyhow, whatever about that, this is a lovely little recipe for celiac bread. That's more general use. A lot of the celiac breads, they're texturally, they're not that nice. They're just lacking something. So I'm going to be using a base of cornmeal and oatmeal. So I'm going to be making kind of an American style cornbread. So very, very simple. We're using baking soda, and I'm going to be using some bread soda as well in this. Baking powder. So with that you need an acid. Buttermilk is going to be that acid. And there's nothing wrong with dairy. It's always a case of finding what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Some people will have a reaction with dairy, just have to leave it out. It's as simple as that. You just have to kind of find your way. But from an inflammatory point of view, staying with these kind of whole grains, oats, polentas, or cornmeal, it can be a very, very good option, but I'd stress it can be a good option because nobody is the same. Everybody is going to be responding to things differently. But anyhow, without further ado, this is skillet cornbread. So the very first thing you do is pop your oven on. It needs to be at least 220 degrees. And if you have a nice cast iron skillet, that's better to use. You could use a non-stick pan or something like that, but the old skillet is good because, it just kind of works very, very well. You need to preheat the skillet as well in the oven. So get them up to a good hot oven, 220 degrees at least, and heat the skillet as well. That's the first job. Next job, we're going to have our dry ingredients and our wet ingredients, and then we're going to combine them together. So, dry ingredients. I have my polenta. I have the recipe written up on this one. So it's about a cup of polenta, half cup of the corn. What I've done with this is the oats. I've taken my oats and just put them in a liquidizer and turned them into a flour. So half a cup of oats. I'm going to put a pinch of salt, about half a teaspoon of salt into that. I'm going to use cornstarch, tablespoon of cornstarch. So normal corn flour, if you like. Whereas the other one is cornmeal. It's very easy to mix the two of them up. One is kind of a starch. The other one is more of a grain, just a ground grain. Then I have my baking powder, and I'm just going to pop that in there. And my baking soda, and I'm going to just pop that in there as well. So there's my dry ingredients done. Just mix those around a little bit. Very, very easy. And just good idea. Sometimes you'll find that your baking powder or bread soda, baking soda can kind of clump up a little bit, so it's good to kind of break those up a little bit as well if you have any kind of clumps on it. Now, for my wet ingredients, I have 1.5 cups of buttermilk, and I'm going to pop into that 1 egg. And into that also, I'm going to put about 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Now, I don't need to use your good olive oil for this. This is where the slightly cheaper olive oil comes in, because the good olive oil would be kind of wasted on this kind of using a really expensive finishing oil. So your kind of standard olive oil is perfect for this. And then that's my wet ingredients. I'll just take these things out of my way then. So I'm going to give those a little bit of a whisk up. And then what I'm going to do is just very, very simply, into my dry ingredients, I'm going to simply add my wet ingredients. and just twist those around and form those into a nice batter. Yeah, it'll look like kind of a nice thick kind of pancake batter, and just when I twist this up, I'll just pour a little piece and you'll be able to get an idea of the texture you want. And quite quickly, because you're using both baking soda and baking powder, you're going to start seeing the kind of little bubbles form very fast. Because again, that works by the acid in the cornmeal or in the buttermilk reacting with the alkaline that's in the powder, and that creates the carbon dioxide. Just a different way of lightening up something than using yeast. So that's all done, and what you're looking for is a nice little consistency, nice kind of pouring kind of, think about a nice pancake batter. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is my preheated skillet in my preheated oven. I'm going to just take that out now. Being very, very careful, obviously. Now you could either use butter if you're more traditional, or coconut oil as I'm going to use. And about a teaspoon of coconut oil or butter. We'll just pop that onto that pan. With a pastry brush then, just watching the handle. Brush the whole pan. And make sure it's just nicely oiled. I probably used a little bit too much there, so I'm just going to take that piece out. So your pan nicely oiled, and then into your hot pan, I'm going to just add my my batter. And very quickly you'll start seeing this thicken up the pan around the edges and so on. Just trying to spread it through there. And then that'll go into the hot oven, about 220 degrees, until either golden or about 25 minutes, thereabouts. So in it goes, and that's a nice skillet cornbread on the way. And there we have it. My cornbread. Now, as you can see, it's a lovely golden, and I've taken this out of the oven about 4 minutes before 25. So it's actually, depending on your oven, when it gets a nice golden, you'll be able to check if it's cooked on the inside. If you just get a knife or a little skewer, and you can just go in. And don't forget, once that's dry, that'll be fine like that. And again, as you can see, it's just lovely and coming away from the sides nicely. We'll just let that cool just a little bit, and then hopefully I'll be able to turn this out. And that's our nice skillet cornbread. A lovely gluten-free bread that's a little bit more interesting in trying to take something that's fundamentally never really going to work well, a flour-based bread, but go with completely different ingredients, and there's a very, very good gluten-free option. And it fits in nicely with an anti-inflammatory diet. It's quite a high fiber, using whole grains. The core grains in this are oats and cornmeal. So it's a lovely, simple little bread.